My name is Gords, also known as MC WizKid. Welcome to Series 1 of the Pod Noodle. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another instalment of the Pod Noodle. And every month, it feels so exciting and fresh to me because the level of guest that I have on this show is just phenomenal. And I know from all the emails, I know from all the social media messages, just how much you guys are enjoying listening to these. And let me tell you, this month is no exception because sat on my screen right now, I have got arguably one of the biggest producers in house and hard dance. In his later years, transforming it to hardcore and hardstyle. He's got one of the biggest labels of upbeat, hard-edged music in the world. And not only that, I mean, this guy has got celebrity fans. He's worked with the biggest and the best. He plays some of the biggest shows. And also, he's the first person that I've ever interviewed that is sat right now in Australia. So thanks to the power of technology beaming in from sunny Australia, although I think it's nighttime right at the moment there, I've got the legend that is Technikal/Technikore. Welcome. Thank you so much, man. How are you?
Hello, mate. Thank you for having me on. It's a huge honour.
Listen, it is an absolute honour for all of us, and I've got so much to ask you. But first of all, how's your day been? You all good? What's going on in the world of Technikal?
It's been a busy week, not going to lie. Happy for it to be Friday. Happy to be the end of Friday as well. I know it's just kicking off for you. I'm not going to lie, my legs are aching. I've switched to a standing desk last week, and the fifth day in standing up, and my legs are ready to give in. So no rest for the wicked.
Do you know, every day I try and hit 10,000 steps because of my stupid watch, right? And sometimes I absolutely smash it, but equally, if say it's bedtime and I'm on like 9,800, then I sort of find myself stomping on the spot just to hit 10,000. Now that you've got a standing desk, has that sort of like, does that feed in? I know it's good for your back and blah, 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 but does it sort of feed into the step count and all that kind of jazz? Do you find yourself sort of dancing around when you're making tunes and whatever?
I'm definitely more mobile, and I do find myself, catch myself, and I know where I'm definitely moving in times that I wouldn't be. Saying that, my watch doesn't seem to pick up like my shuffles around on the spot. It doesn't count them as steps. So yeah, maybe I need a new watch. I feel better about myself.
Yeah, maybe. Right, okay. Well, listen, let's get into it because there's loads to cover, and I know it's getting late over there, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But equally, I'm so excited to hear your story. Now, for those that don't know, I have known Alf many years now, probably just more or less perhaps the start of your career. I think we first sort of met, but we'll get into that. We'll get into that a bit later on. My first question to you, and I want you to sort of cast your mind back. I mean, I know you're well versed in the podcast and you've listened to lots of episodes and have enjoyed them, so you kind of know the structure of the way we're going to go. But I want to ask you, when it comes to sort of dance music and discovering music as a whole, what are your sort of earliest, when did it sort of catch you? And I don't mean sort of like as a child listening to Humpty Dumpty or, you know, old King Cole or whatever. When did music sort of start to take a hold? When did you know that was the sort of thing that was capturing your attention?
Well, the like earliest formative years weren't actually too far after the Humpty Dumpty days, to be honest with you. I mean, a lot of this I can't remember because I was so young, but I've got the newspaper clippings that my mum and dad have kept up over the years. Basically, I had a bit of rhythm as like a young toddler, and they noticed I was always like tapping. It's funny now, I've got no rhythm at all now, but they'd always catch me tapping my crayons to like songs that were on the TV or on the radio. So they bought me this little drum set, and it just kind of spiraled. The drum kit got bigger. I got a better one a few months later, and I started drumming at like 3 years old in their local nightclub, a little club in Wellington called Gino's. And yeah, it ended up spiraling into like I went on this like interview on This Morning and started doing this whole drumming thing. There was status quo was supposed to be there, but they didn't turn up last minute. They swerved it. So it was an almost but not quite. But yeah, I just remember all my earliest musical memories are all Dire Straits, Status Quo songs.
Well, do you know, it's funny you say Dire Straits because I absolutely adored, I think it's called Brothers in Arms was the album that I sort of fell in love with. It had all the Walk of Life and, you know, all the big, I want my MTV, all of the big tunes.
That was the song. That was the song. It's Money for Nothing. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. That's the one.
See, this is the thing. I don't know any of the tracks by name because I wasn't much of a information retainer at three years old. But I remember them when they come on and they sort of unlock these core memories.
So good. Obviously, the bands that you've mentioned there are sort of 80s rock. And when did you find the sort of switch to the break beats or the kick drums? When did that sort of happen?
It was a bit of an accident actually. I've got an older half brother. In fact, I've got two, but one of them, he's about 15, 16 years older than me. And I remember I must have only been about 10 or 11, but he just got into DJing and, you know, he wasn't taking it super serious, but he had a pair of decks and he was buying vinyl. And to be honest, the music just washed over me back then. I wasn't really old enough to appreciate it. And I remember I used to only see him maybe a couple of times a year, and he gave me a cassette tape of a mixtape that he'd done. And I remember taking it home and leaving it on the side. And I sort of ignored it for a year, and I started doing a paper round about a year later, and I picked it up. I'd actually picked it up by mistake, thinking it was something else. And I was stuck with this tape. So I listened to it on the round, and it had, you got to remember as well, these tracks at the time, they were like brand new releases. It was like Insomnia was on it, like The Whole Meter at the Love Parade. And it was just all these, just absolute seminal anthems now. But they were relatively new songs at the time. And I was just like, what is this stuff? And I remember counting down the days till I could go back up and see him again and just ask him what all these tracks were called, so I could, you know, file it in my geeky encyclopedia in my brain of whatever, you know, I like knowing the names of things. It means a lot to me, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was kind of started from then. It just kick-started this massive obsession with dance music. I kind of stumbled across a Essential Mix one night, I remember in the late 90s, and it was Paul Oakenfold doing a set on Brighton Beach. And I just remember him playing tracks like, I mean, again, you got to remember, it's a massively commercial track now, tracks like Planet Perfecto, Bullet in the Gun. I just never heard anything like it before. I was like, what is this? This is incredible. And yeah, I never looked back really. That was it. I became a music geek. I was obsessed. I was just a full-on trance head, really.
So obviously, I mean, crikey, you're literally the same age as my kids when you're doing all this sort of stuff. So, I mean, what was the sort of transition then? So obviously you've fallen in love with this sort of early trance and house music, like many of us did. When you know what happens next? I mean, obviously you're listening to these cassettes. You've got your older brother that's sort of feeding you these beats. Where next?
So it was like it was the weekly listening to like your Judge Jules shows and things like that on Radio 1, which were like a window into this sound. I mean, I was gutted that I couldn't go clubbing. I really wanted to go out to these events, but I was only like 12 or 13 at the time, maybe even younger actually. I think it might have only been 11. So that was well off the cards. And you got to bear in mind, I looked like, you know, Harry Potter's less fortunate little brother as well. So there was no chance I was ever getting in anywhere, even when I did start getting a bit older. So I just focused all my energies and everything into trying to work out how this music was made. And obviously back then it wasn't quite as easy as it is now. There weren't the resources that are available to kids that want to get into music production now. It was very much, finding my way in the dark and with it all. And I initially got my interest was kind of stimulated with there was you've probably heard of it. There was a game that came out on the PlayStation back in '98 called Music. Did you ever?
Yeah, of course. Do you know, in my loft, I think I've probably still got the old. They used to have these giant memory cards on PlayStations back then, didn't they? Like hench memory cards, and I think I've still got some of the tunes. Yeah. So you sort of mastered that then, did you?
Well, I just remember one that there was a magazine that had the demos on the front of the magazines on the PlayStation mags, and this demo disc, I remember it had all these games on it, and one of the demos it had on it was for this music creation thing. I'd remembered seeing it the month before, and I didn't think much of it, you know, and I'd given it a go, and I'd gone into school the next day with my mates. I was like, "Did you get the new magazine?" They're like, "Yeah." I was like, "Did you try that new play? Did you try the new the music game?" "No, mate, it sounds shit." "What do you mean, a music game? Who'd want to do that?" I was like, "Oh no, it's amazing. Give it a go." And then they just couldn't understand. They couldn't get their head around it. You know, they just wanted to be playing games where you're shooting people and stuff. but yeah, I ended up getting the full thing from my mum for a birthday present, and just it was a very, very early amateur bit of software all up, but it was just such a great window, and it's like a gateway, I guess, like a gateway drug for music production. Really, it just got me onto wanting to seek out how to take it, a step further.
When did it sort of start becoming like, I need Cubase or Reason or whatever it was that you went to next? What happened next?
So I was very aware that this wasn't how the pros were putting their tracks together. Now, really, studio equipment was essential back then to make professional records. That was the problem. But it was the dawn of when I started getting into this. It was the dawn of the VST instrument, where everything started becoming able to be done in the box, on the computer, so to speak. Very primitive compared to what we have now. But I had I think it was version 2 or 3 of Fruity Loops that I got hold of, and it really was a step up. I mean, again, just primitive by what we know today, but it was just the next step, really, and it was where I started putting my first tracks that ended up getting signed were done on Fruity Loops. I probably stayed on Fruity Loops for a good few years until I moved on to something better again. But I say better again, that's obviously debatable with a lot of people, because that's a whole other argument.
We're going down the whole iPhone, Android phone conversation here, aren't we? But how long were you sort of, because you're really flippant in the way you say, I started with Fruity Loops and then I got my first tunes. So
that was a good few years between.
So a few years of grinding and getting to know it. Where were you getting the information? Because YouTube wasn't really. It was around, but it wasn't like it is now. It's a minefield of information now. But in those times, it wasn't so go-to, if you like. So how were you sort of learning this stuff?
Well, there was this fantastic message board that I was a member of in the early 2000s called Sample City, and there was a whole bunch of us producers that we all met on there, and have all gone on to do great things in different genres. Even today, I'm in contact with a lot of them. They've become lifelong friends. And one of the guys, it must have been about 2002. It was a guy called Pierre PNR, and he lived in Namibia. And we had a very similar sound at the time, this sort of quite grimy, hard trancey, hard house sound. And we started working together remotely online, which at the time felt so, quite futuristic in itself. People were like, how are you writing these records together? You live on the other side of the world. And I guess that the internet had only been around at this point for, it's not more, maybe less than a decade. So it was quite a crazy thing. But we worked together online for, it must have been about 3 years until we did, start seeing some success. But it was just sharing the resources we had, learning things, finding things out. Bearing in mind, at school age, you don't have much to do other than your homework. And I wasn't much of a social butterfly. I didn't really go out. I just stayed in. I think maybe me and Matt had something in common with Gamma.
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
Very much so. Yeah. So it was just safety in numbers, really, and we all kind of broke through at the same time. There was about 5 of us, if anyone that knows their hard trance stuff at the time, but there was Guyver was one of them, who became a big producer on Tidy. It was Dark by Design, Gaz West, who went on to do great things in more the north of England with the Good Grief brand. Pierre, obviously, who's now producing stuff with Paul Van Dyke and all sorts, and people like myself. There's more as well, but there was a good crew, and we all came out of this site, and that was where we all kind of got our resources from, and that was kind of how I had to go, because YouTube didn't even exist till I think it was 2007, so we still had 5 years to go until then. That's nuts. I
was just listening to those names, and I remember Dark by Design and Guyver, of course, and I think don't you think that's kind of mad how these sort of guys on a forum are all sort of their wings spread and off they went? Don't you think that's pretty crazy, isn't it?
It was crazy that it was all at the same time. We were all at the same time as well, which was mad. And I genuinely believe if we weren't all there, I don't think we would have done it all as quickly. That's the thing. I think it was having a place like that.
So when did you get your first release then? So obviously the names you've just spoke about there have all gone on to do big things in their respective lanes, if you like. When did you sort of see a bit of success from the stuff that you were making, and how did that feel, man? You must have been gassed.
Oh, it was crazy. I mean, I'd finished school and I just started going to what's it called? The next thing, college. Yeah. Sorry, it's got different names in Australia. I've got all the English terminology. Sixth form, that's the one. Started doing sixth form college, and academically, my interest had just fallen off a cliff. Like even towards the last couple of years of being at school, I started off being very academic, and I was just not interested at all by the end, which was a bit of a shame. But going through the motions of college, but all this kind of stuff had started kicking off, and I remember. The first signing was actually I got two at once. Funnily enough, me and Pierre, we'd done a track, and we'd had interest from Kev Energy and his guys, the New Energy Collective. They were running this, a whole bunch of labels over there, and they'd taken interest in. It was two of our records. And they wanted to put an EP out. But on my solo side, I'd been sending out demos for ages, and you know what it's like when you're sending demos and no one knows who you are. And obviously, the demos are never quite as good as you think they are in your own head. So I'm relentlessly sending them out, not getting any responses, and feeling a bit disheartened. And I found this little company. I think they'd approached me because I definitely wouldn't have been proactive enough to have found them on my own. They were called Raw 42, and they used to. They were essentially like a sort of talent scout company, where they would take demos of people that they thought were great, and they'd have a better link in, so to speak. It's like having a word in someone's ear kind of thing. And that's what they did for me at the big distributor Alpha Magic. Do you remember Alpha Magic?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for those that don't know, Alpha Magic was a distributor, right?
Yeah, they were a big distributor, but they had they must have had about 50, 60 in-house labels as well. They were pretty big, really, weren't they? They distribute. In fact, I think they distributed a good portion of the happy hard scene back then, or the UK hardcore scene back then, for sure. Because I know there was quite a few upset people when they unfortunately went into liquidation, but that's another story. So I heard from those guys and teed up. I think it was a three track contract with them. So I remember getting the phone call, and I was in a class at college at the time, and it was in maths as well. And I hated maths, hated it, and got the phone call, and I'd seen, because I'd saved the number before, and I knew who it was. I knew that they were calling about this track. It was either going to be yes or a no. And I remember taking the call, and the maths teacher said, "If you take that call, you're not coming back in." And I was like, "I'll take my chances." Walked out, and luckily they took the tracks, and I actually got called into to the office, the head office, about a week later, and they basically gave me the ultimatum. They were like, "You've got to pick doing your music or staying at college," because basically I've been taking so many days off working on stuff. I'd been doing remixes for a couple of labels as well, and I just wasn't in, if you get me. I wasn't focused. So they made me make that difficult choice, which wasn't so difficult at all, really.
That's amazing. What was the song, by the way? What's the title of it, if people wanted to look it up?
So the solo track is called Annihilation.
Okay.
Came out on a label called Mohawk Records. Yeah, another story that's linked into this is I remember that when the label A&R guy had called me about this Annihilation record, he'd said, "Look, we've got it down. We've got the artwork done. We know you want to call yourself Alf Bamford, but it just doesn't look right on the sleeve. Alf Bamford Annihilation." I said, "It doesn't sound very rock and roll." And I was like, "Yeah, I get that." But I was quite into the idea of just using my name. I hadn't really come up with anything else. And they said, "Look, the artwork's got to be finalized in a couple of days. You've got 2 days to think up something that's just a little bit more snappy." And I was like, "Fuck, that's an ultimatum right there, isn't it?" And it came to me that night. I was playing a video game, and there was a little vehicle, and a game I was playing called Command and Conquer, and it was a little vehicle with a little gun on the back of a Jeep, and it was called a Technikal, but spelt correctly. And I thought, well, that's quite a cool name, actually. I was like, and I think it was that sort of 2000s craze of switching out phonetic letters and coming up with something different, the kind of like the elite gamer vibe. So I just switched it out for a K, which I've always regretted, because people always write it down and put the K in the wrong bloody place. Or I get the 2 Ks. I think I remember at one point there was I'd had 10 flyers done years later, and I think only one of them had my name spelt right. It was brilliant.
Well, do you know, I used to, with the WizKid, right? So there's the way that I spell it, it's WHIZZKID, right? That's the way I spell it.
Yeah.
Now, when I was a little naughty on a park trying to be a rapper, it was two separate words. It was whiz and kid, right? So that's how, you know, in those days of me being a nuisance. And then as I started to appear on flyers, they squished the two words together so it all became one word, right? Like the way I've just spelt it to you. But the amount of extra Zs, not enough Zs, double D on the end as well. Whiz, like honestly, I don't know how. Like, I think in those sort of formative years for both you and I'm sure we've had many more, you know, variations of the spelling. And then just to make matters even more confusing, I think there's like a reggae / hip hop guy called WizKid now as well that's having great levels of success, and he's WIZKID. Yeah, so just to confuse matters even more.
Having listened to your episode with Dougal, though, how fortunate is it that sometimes people do spell things wrong? With in Gamma's case,
yeah, absolutely, that would not have been a good look for Matt.
So funny. I remember Matt telling me that story a long time ago, but it was so funny to hear it again and hear it from Paul's side because that's wonderful.
Yeah, it's really cool story. I mean, so well, as is yours. Actually, while you were telling me about how you got your name, I was sat here silently smiling my face off. I think it's really cool. I love finding the origins. I'm always like, because like people often ask me, you know, how did you get the name WizKid and blah blah blah, and so I'm always sort of mindful of asking that question because I'm aware that I get asked it all the time, but hearing you offer that, I absolutely love that. So obviously you've got your name, you've got your identity, you've got a song out. When did the song started sort of making an impact? Was it that first song, or was it a couple of songs later? When did you sort of feel like, hang on a minute, this has started to get a bit juicy?
Well, it definitely wasn't the first song, but I think the most amazing thing with with your first release is just walking into an actual shop and seeing it there. That was when, you know, my wig got blown off at that point. It's probably why I've got no hair now, funnily enough. But I remember John Peel, legendary Radio 1 DJ. He played my first release just on this random, I think it must have been about like 11:30 at night, and he sandwiched it in between like this random Rockefeller song, and then it was like a hip hop track played after, because he was so eclectic, wasn't he? He just played anything, John Peel. And I had the recording of him playing it, and I think I've lost it now. And it was him giving a little spiel at the start and saying my full name and everything. I was like, oh, brilliant, there you go. At least I had to change my name, but at least people know my name's Alf Bamford, so that's all good. But yeah, it was just a great thing to hear someone. It was when I told my dad that John Peel had played my track. That was when he was like, all right, this is serious.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. And what about the DJs? Like, did you have sort of like for me, if you've listened to the Dougal one, you'll know that Dougal and LSD were the first two sort of rave DJs that I heard on a cassette. I've spoke about it many times over my career. Did you sort of have ideal scenarios where DJ bloody blah will play it, or, you know, was there that sort of moment for you, or not really?
That came later. At this point, I wasn't actually old enough to still be going out yet. So the whole actual going to the raves, going to the clubs, that did come later. And believe me, it did come that time. But at this stage, I didn't know anyone. It was just me and my message board geeks. That was all I knew, really. With the occasional email to, you know, one of the label heads. I think I started speaking to the guys at Tidy, and that was obviously Tidy, for anyone in my industry, was just this huge entity, and just to, you know, be on email to the Tidy boys was just, I remember, blew my mind. But yeah, there wasn't really anything like that. I wasn't in that zone at that point, no. But yeah, when I did start going out and finding my favorite DJs, and when they'd be supporting my stuff, that did start happening. That probably more so happened when I got into the hardcore side. I'm not going to lie. That's when I felt that more.
Amazing. Well, I'm going to come to hardcore in a couple of questions' time, actually. But you've just name dropped where I was going to take you next, actually. Tidy. Now, I'm sure a lot of people listening to this are huge fans of your body of work, because I mean, you've released some phenomenal records in both hard house and hardcore, of course. And Tidy is just, for those that perhaps aren't familiar for whatever reason, is like this juggernaut of a hard dance label, or hard house as it was then sort of termed. And of course you had the Tidy Boys at the helm. I mean, they went on to have people like Lisa Lashes, of course BK has also been a guest on the podcast. Loads of the big names that we're all really familiar with now in 2024, and all have gone off to do amazing, phenomenal things. The list is, you know, it could go on forever. And equally, for a bit of a nerdy one, is one of the Tidy Boys was actually part of Jive Bunny. So sort of,
that's right.
Yeah, in the sort of late 80s, early 90s, Jive Bunny with "Come On Everybody," you know, all of those big songs. Then so they've already got this huge back catalogue, this reputation. They've had huge commercial success, and now they've got this ginormous brand. And as we've just heard, we've kind of got this sort of schoolboy that fell in love with his PlayStation and decided to pick up Fruity Loops. You know, going onto the label. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that. What that must have been mental. I can't imagine how buzzing you must have been. What was that like, man?
It was actually quite funny how it happened, because the track that we ended up getting signed, it was a double track EP in the end. But the A side was a release I'd done, funnily enough, with the guy I mentioned earlier from Namibia, Pierre. We'd done this hard trance record called Global Panic, and we'd written it as a theme song for the event that we were going to go and play in Australia, because we were due to go to Australia in 2004 for our very first tour. And it was also, funnily enough, the first time me and Pierre had ever met when we went over there. So we made this theme song, this big hard trance track, and we'd sent it to Tidy. And I remember Lee Haslam was the A&R guy at the time, and he is again now, actually. But he'd replied and said, it's good, but it's not for us. I'm like, that's fine. That's exactly what we were expecting. We weren't expecting to get a release on Tidy, no way, but, you know, can't hurt to try. And it was only when we got back, I'm pretty sure it was when we got back from the tour, and we had an email from Amadeus, one of the Tidy Boys, saying, "The Global Panic track you sent, we love it. We've been playing it every set. We want to sign it." And it was just hilarious, because we've been turned down by the A&R guy, Lee, but in the midst of it all, I think that the Tidy Boys were so into it that I think they forced his hand, and I think in the end Lee had come round to it, because he ended up picking it as the A side on the EP, and the other track was a track called System Shock. And funnily enough, I can't go that far back in my discography without a bit of a cringe sometimes, because obviously as a producer you do get very critical of your older stuff, but those are two tracks I can still listen to and hold my head up high and say, yeah, I think that's some of my best work. You know, it's nice to have that.
That's really cool, man. Like because I think honestly, for me, track wise, the first records, you know, vinyls that I was ever on, there was a DAT floating around all of the sort of breakbeat happy hardcore producers in the 90s that had lots of me going, "Make some noise," and "Horns Crew," and you know, it was anyway. It got ragged to death, and I ended up on loads of tunes, often not getting credited, but I'd sort of hear it on a cassette and go, "Oh my god, rewind that bit, rewind that set," and I'm very proud. Too. I'm very proud of all of those ones, and it's quite nice when people go, "Oh, that was you," and I'm like, "Yeah, that was me." But then later, my first studio, I suppose, as a vocalist rather than just a sample, was with Breeze and Mickey Skeedale. Do you remember those two? And well, of course, you know Breezy because you're still in contact with Breezy, but Mickey was working with Breezy at the time. And I remember driving over to their studio, and I had a lyric that I was doing in the raves, which was "Sexy Baby," and it was very popular with the ravers, and I was just sort of making a name for myself. And when I did that lyric, people would sing bits or all of it back to me. So I thought, oh, that'd be great on a track. You know, that maybe that's what I'll do now that they've invited me. And I remember those two guys sort of sat at their computer, And behind them on their swivel chairs was a microphone. And I remember I was so nervous. I was just like profusely sweating, like there was something wrong with me. And I was trying to sort of sing. I'm no singer, but I can sort of sing. Does that make sense? I'm not a singer, but I can.
Yeah, for sure. I get it.
I can kind of hold a tune and I can sound all right, if I get it right. But I'm not an R&B singer or anything like that. So I'm trying to sing this sort of like sexy baby thing, and I just remember and anyway, the song's in existence. You can it went out on vinyl and on Infinity Records, but I listened to that with I own a copy just for the sake of owning it, but I cannot bear myself on it because I know how crap I was on that record, if you know what I mean, because I was so scared. So I think it's really cool that you can look back on something like that and sort of enjoy it, and feel proud of it. Do you know what I mean? Because honestly, my first experience of being on a big release was not good. So I think that's really, really cool. But then I suppose, and I'm going off on a bit of a tangent, if you listen to like the real early 90s hardcore, and I'm talking like 92, 93 stuff, and the low end and the way the break beats rolled and, all the sample sort of stuff, it sounds really nice and well produced. A lot of it does. Not all of it, but there's loads of great tracks that just sound ahead of their time. And then
it's
sort
almost
of
effortless because it's not trying to be too clinical.
Yeah, exactly. And then sort of the mid to late 90s, again, not all records before people start crying and having a go at me, but some of them sort of sound a bit brash and a bit, they don't sound great loud and, things like that. And it's sort of, so do you think that was the case with your first sort of track? Do you think that you just sort of stumbled across something that sort of sonically... Well, yeah, go on.
A disclaimer would be on that is that, as I said, it's particularly those two tracks on Tidy I can look back on. There is a body of work around that era that I can't bear to listen to. There really is. And there's many a track over the years that even some of the tracks I get requested to play now, and I'm like, I literally can't play that track tonight. And they're like, why have you not got it? I was like, no, because I can't listen to it again. So they do exist. They do exist, those tracks. I think everyone's got those, don't they? Quite like, as you just said yourself with your first track. I mean, we can't love everything we've done.
So I can only imagine what this. I've got this sort of picture of you. I mean, you already look really young anyway, but I'm imagining a really, really young looking version of you getting rang up by Amadeus from the Tidy Boys. You've got this song going out on Tidy Records, and it must have just all felt like a whirlwind dream. How was that, man?
Yeah, it was brilliant. It was awesome. It was just great to be. I think the best bit about it all, I think for me, was it wasn't just the getting the track on the label. It was the becoming a part of the team, and all this crew that you looked up to. And it was something that I also got to share the same feeling again. Years later with the Rave Baby thing. It's just, I think sometimes just being part of something, it almost means more than the actual accolade itself of what, or the goal you've achieved. It's almost it's worth more than that.
Yeah, totally. No, I completely get that. And of course, with Tidy being such a big household brand, and it had commercial albums. Obviously, the Tidy Girls were huge, wasn't they? It was Lisa. Who was it? It was Lisa and Savage.
Well, it was the Extreme Euphoria Tidy album.
That's right.
Actually,
yeah, of course.
Got me mixed by Lisa Lashes. That was actually what got me into that harder sound. I sort of skipped over that part, but that's what leapfrogged me out of the trance sound and into the harder stuff. So it was just because of the Tidy Girls there that kind of made that happen for me. So yeah, God knows what. If I hadn't have listened to that CD, then maybe I'd be a trance producer instead. Who knows? Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it? How things sort of just take you off on a different sort of trajectory and a different path.
Yeah.
It's so it's fascinating to me, which is part of the reason why I do this podcast, because I love to hear all of you guys' stories. It's just so inspiring and so exciting, absolutely fascinating. I think it was during your time at Tidy actually was the first time that we did a song together.
It was.
Yeah, and was our first one. I was trying to remember because we did 2 or 3.
It wasn't our first. Our first was a track for my album it was my very first album, Club Together, which was a series of collaborations, and you were the only MC. that was on the album, but I think it was even before the hardcore stuff. Before I was even doing the hardcore stuff. Yeah, but yeah, I think I'd heard you on a track with it was either with Andy or with Matt, or maybe with Andy and Matt possibly.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, and it was that. Do you remember 20XX? It was a very
obscure
track.
I do. Yeah,
very odd track, but yeah, and then we followed it up with the music for Horror Generation on Tidy, which went quite big at the time, didn't it?
It went mental. I think it was Mix Mac track of the year or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was certainly nominated for it, wasn't it? I think so. Yeah.
Well, it was. The funniest thing is because of my songs with Andy Whitby and of course Matt Lee and now yourself, a lot of the people in that genre at that time, and I'm not suggesting they would feel like that now because time's moved on and the landscape is different, but MCs were a bit of a dirty word to
certainly in the hard house. No, they were absolutely.
And of course, I'm out here making tracks with some of the biggest guys in hard house at the time. I was getting a lot of heat on the forums because
really?
Yeah, man, I got loads of heat from that. But it did me, it did me more good than bad. So,
of course.
But yeah, it was an exciting time, and I absolutely love. I remember when you sent me the finished version of Music for a Harder Generation. I was just in love with it. I think I rang you and I said, I think this is one of the best songs I've ever been on it. I was just so in love with it. I couldn't believe
it's.
Yeah, sorry, go on.
It's very strange. It's a strange track, isn't it? It's very unusual.
Well, it's sort of a fusion between, I suppose, hard dance and at the time and electro at the time. Yeah. And it was just a sort of fusion between the two. And I remember just listening to it in my car, just thinking, this guy is just next level. Like, I couldn't believe what you had sent me. So many fond memories.
It's got a killer vocal hook as well. You can't deny that.
Talk to me about, right, and I know a lot of people want to know about this, not just me, but I do want to know about this. I know that one of your biggest fans on this planet is a uber famous actor that has been in Shaun of the Dead and all these other films, and it's Nick Frost. Talk to me about that, man.
It's crazy. I mean, he's definitely more of a hard house guy, but he's definitely partial to a bit of hard trance. It was a weird one. I can't remember how we ended up first speaking. I think I was tagged in something potentially that he posted, and someone had brought it to my attention. And I think I just sent him a Twitter message and said, "Hey mate, is this legit?" And I think he came back to me, and we had a back and forth for a bit. And then I sent him a couple of my new albums, and it was just a really cool, strange occurrence. You just never, when you sit down and watch something on like a movie of caliber like that you'd ever think that the actors behind the screen are sitting in their spare time listening to your music. You'd never imagine it, would you? And let's be honest, he doesn't look like a hard trance fan, does he? Your conventional hard trance fan. What do they look like? I wouldn't have pictured Nick Frost.
I just think it's so awesome, man. I remember, I think it probably was on Twitter, because Twitter was quite big at the time. And I remember sort of watching a game of tennis between, like reply tennis between you and him on Twitter, going, because I obviously followed him because I was a fan of his movies and his work, and I thought he was a funny guy and he seemed really likable. And then I followed you because obviously I'm a fan and a friend and et cetera, et cetera. And I remember seeing you guys chatting, and occasionally he'd tweet you and things like that. I was going, this is nuts, man.
Yeah, it is pretty nuts. So it really is.
Did you?
He's done quite a few things with the Tidy guys. Actually, he did. When they announced the lineup for one of the Weekenders, he was one of the guys doing the lineup announcement. They were pulling the names out of the hat, and he gets right involved. He's really into it.
I absolutely love that. I love that he's not forgot. Because obviously I assume that was a time in his life that he's never let go of. Because there's a few actors and pop stars that I sort of remember back in the day on the dance floor, and you wouldn't ever hear them mention such things. But I think it's really cool that he sort of wears it like a badge, and also he's a Technikal fan, man. How cool is that? I love it. I absolutely love it.
When I signed the album, it was an album I'd done at the time called Tectonic, and I remembered signing the cover, and I wrote on it, "I'm going to sign something because it must be nice for you to get something signed for once."
It's so cool, man. Has there been any others? Is he your most famous fan, do you think, that you know of course? Is there any other sort of low-key celebs?
Probably, yeah. None of the others have come out of the woodwork yet. Not just yet. I keep BDI on Twitter.
Yeah, keep watching, man. Okay, well, listen, I could talk to you about the hard dance days or hard house days forever, but we've got a lot of ground. We've got not much time and a lot of ground to cover. So
sure,
let's talk. You've touched upon it, and obviously where you are now as a producer, of course, is hardcore and hardstyle and more upbeat music for the most part. So talk to me about that transition from sort of hard house into hardcore. You've mentioned Raver Baby. Give me a little bit of that sort of chapter.
So the sort of earliest seeds of the whole story is it goes back to the Alpha Magic days when I was doing the releases with those guys for the year that they were active when I was working in 2003. And I got a call one day from the A&R guy I deal with, a guy called Lee. And he rang me and said, got a DJ here. He works in a slightly different style to you, but he thinks, I've played him some of your stuff and he thinks that you might be able to kind of work with him. His name's Hixie. And I was like, right, okay. And bearing in mind, I wasn't happy hard. I wasn't UK hardcore. I didn't know anything about the genre. I'd never heard of the guy before, but I'd looked him up and I was like, oh yeah, he's quite a big DJ. And he didn't live far from me. He was in Portsmouth. I was in Winchester. So Lee had sort of teed up this meeting with us. He said he wants to come and pick you up and show you a studio, play some of his stuff. I think basically at the time, I think this was basically when just before Ian was kind of doing the Rave Baby thing. I think what ended up happening was he'd found Mick Recon and Wayne Squaddy, and they ended up joining. But this was maybe a year or so before, so I think he was on the hunt, so to speak. And he came down and he picked me up and went down to his place in Portsmouth. And he was a great guy. Loved him. I mean, you know what? He is one of the funniest blokes you've ever met. And I would think I must have only been 16, 17 at the time. And I was just in awe of his humour. He's just the funniest bloke ever. But I was very aware he was always talking about this sort of other industries, other scene that I wasn't familiar with at all. And to be honest, at the time, I wasn't really that interested in. And took me to his place. We started sort of working on, I remember we sort of did this test session together where we worked on a remix, and it was a remix of Heartbeats. We were trying to do like a hard dancey hardcore remix of that. The Breeze and Styles track, obviously.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't feeling the music. I didn't really understand it. I didn't get it. I didn't understand why it was so fast. All the tracks was playing. It just was so foreign to where my brain was at. Couldn't really get on board. And that was the only meeting we ever really had. But we sort of stayed in contact, and it'd been a few years had gone by. There was in fact, I'd probably say there was a good 2 or 3 years between us speaking again. But I mentioned earlier going to Australia in 2004. I went back in 2005, and it's actually where I met my wife now. We met in a club out there, funnily enough. Not that I made the best first impression when we first met, but we ended up getting together, and my wife happened to be really into the UK hardcore sound, and it was her that kind of got me around to it, and it was just from hearing it all the time. And I was like, she just kept playing these bonkers CDs, and I was like, this is that guy that I worked with a few years ago. I was like, this music's fucking really good. And it was this must have been around about Bonkers 14 time.
Yeah.
And I started warming up to it, and I was like, I'm going to give this stuff a go again. And because I still had Ian's number, I gave him a text, and I was like, hey, Ian, it's been a few years. In the time we've not spoke, I've really got into this sound. I was like, can I send you some demos? And that's kind of what reignited that, that relationship, I guess, so to speak. And I guess it took another couple of years for me to really wrap my head around the sound. But I think those seeds were sort of sown much earlier than I anticipated, and I guess it just helped that we really got along to start with, which helped. But so it went back a lot earlier than the timeline would suggest.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So when did you sort of start feeling like? I mean, to be fair, you've gone straight in with one of the gods of hardcore, haven't you, Hixie? But when did it sort of
it's
start?
Not fair, really, is it?
Honestly, I can only imagine some of the Reddit posts that are going to go up about you.
I know,
man.
It was like getting in the fast track lane at the passport control. When everyone else has been queuing up.
How dare you as well? How dare you? but no, like obviously you're doing bits with Hixie. When did it sort of start feeling like this could be home?
It did take a while. I mean, it took. The hardest thing was balancing the two sounds, because I was still very active in the hard house, hard trance stuff. But I realised if I was really going to put my all into this hardcore thing, I needed to kind of take my foot off that and go all in, so to speak. But I mean, we're fast forwarding a few years here from our initial texts of me being reacquainted with the sound, so to speak, and the rave baby thing. Well, there were a few years between that. I mean, it wasn't like, hey, I want to make this stuff. Hey, join the team. I had a lot of work to do to get up to the standard of everyone else's music. I mean, you got to remember at this time, you had Recon, Squaddy, Dougal and Gamma were on, their best gold form at the time. It was very easy to be inspired. That was the thing. The standard was so high. It was something to aim for. And yeah, I guess that's where I aimed. And I mean, I don't think I got anywhere near, but I think someone must have done. And otherwise, I probably wouldn't be here now. But yeah, it was an amazing time for hardcore.
It really was exciting. And you're absolutely right. I mean, Recon and Squad is so. I don't know if we spoke about this on the Hixie interview. We probably did. But the original Raver Baby crew was obviously Hixie, Breeze and Styles, UFO, and then the MCs were Marley, Storm, and myself. And that was how Raver Baby was first sort of put together, if you like, for lack of a better word. Then later on, Recon and Squaddy sort of came along, and et cetera, et cetera. So it was a really exciting time. And I think also what's interesting is that you mentioned Amy falling in love with it. Of course, hardcore was really big in Australia, and we were doing the Raver Baby tours at the time for Powerhouse was the big promoter, I think, in Sydney, and we used to do Melbourne and Brisbane and Adelaide and do like a little tour, and it was just such exciting time. And you're absolutely right, all of the producers, even outside of Raver Baby, so you got Dougal and Gamma, Briskenham, Scott Brown, Cyan Unknown. They're all just making these massive bangers, weren't they? So everywhere you looked,
it's relentless.
There was these huge vocal and I mean, it was so exciting. I mean, I kind of compare that whole era with when I first fell in love with the music in the early 90s, because if you look at, for example, 92 and 93 as a year, there's hundreds of amazing records, like loads, like a crazy amount. You could sit there for a week probably listening to 1992, and I would say it's similar to that time of Raver Baby, Essential Platinum, Quash, Next Generation, Evolution, etc., etc. There was so much good music, and I think where you've kind of found yourself in it, I mean, you just added to that strength, you added that creativity, and it was such a positive thing to have you making hardcore and getting involved. I think I'm really pleased that you did, to be honest.
Oh, thank you, man. It was exceptionally surreal to join the ranks, and I still don't ever feel like I've ever matched up to the level of the legends before. But I mean, you just mentioned going back to, you mentioned the Powerhouse event in Australia. I actually remember me and Amy had got together sort of 2005 time, and we'd come back the following year for the first time as a couple, and we'd come to that event. I think it was where there was it was the Rave Baby crew, and you guys, it was you and Storm, the Acer Arena, I believe it was called then, and right. it was the huge, it was unreal. It was absolutely unreal. It was just that era where every tune was, now you could play that same set and it would just be a classic set, if you get me.
Yeah. Well, because of my TikTok, I do a different year every video, but I dip into the early 90s, the mid 90s, the early 2000s, present day, and whenever I reach for that sort of whole era, there's so many tunes to choose from. It's impossible. It's like, right, what am I going to do next then? Right, okay, who did I chat? Well, I've already shared a Scott Brown 2 weeks ago, so maybe I need to share a Brisk. And then, I don't know, Recon perhaps. Maybe I'll share it. You're right, absolutely right. There were so many bangers. And did you sort of feel, not so much where perhaps the MCs were concerned, but obviously you sort of now rubbing shoulders with Darren Styles and Mark Breeze and Hixie and UFO and et cetera, et cetera. Did you feel right at home there, or did you kind of feel a little bit like, wow? Or like, how did that feel? Was it not even a thing?
I mean, it was just incredibly sick to hang out with those guys. Absolutely. I always felt a little bit like imposter syndrome a little bit. I'm not going to lie. I just didn't ever feel like I'd quite earned the right to be there, if you get me. I don't know why that is. It's strange, isn't it? I still kind of feel a bit like that now. I don't know why that is. I guess I just hold them at such a high level in my head. I guess maybe it's a good thing that I don't think I'm on that. Maybe that's a positive thing. I don't know. But yeah, it was just an honor. It was just like, and also the great thing is they're all just such great guys as well. That's what I mean. People always say don't meet your heroes because they will always disappoint you. But I think with those guys, you can do. You really can, can't you?
Ah, what a lovely thing to say, man. I'm going to tell all of them that you said that. That's really nice, man. That's really, really cool. And that sounds that's the measure of the man, Alf. That's why you've done so well in your music career, because away from your exceptional talent as a producer and songwriter, you're just a great guy. And I'm sure all of the listeners are going to probably want to be your friend now, but well,
I'm looking for some.
Okay, so right, listen, because of time, believe it or not, we're almost at an hour already. So, and we've still got a few things that I want to cover. Obviously, I mentioned at the start, and we've talked about it here and there throughout. I know that we're skipping a lot of stuff, and maybe we'll get a part 2 of this because there is lots of stuff we've had to kind of skimming stone over the top of and haven't really got to the meat and gravy, and so we might have to revisit some of this stuff on another episode. But I want you to now, obviously you're based in Australia now, you've got a beautiful family, you're very happy and settled over there, but also you're involved in, as I mentioned at the start, in one of the biggest labels in hardcore, and that label of course is 170. So talk to me briefly a little bit about that, if that's okay.
Sure. So this will require the backstory, I guess, from myself and James JTS, who was my business partner and production partner and overall partner in crime and naughtiness across the whole board. He is originally one of Amy's friends. So I met James, funny enough, through Amy. Would have been around 2006, 2005, around that time. And I was over for a tour then, come over with Ames. I'd met her friend James and his girlfriend at the time, and they wanted to come over to England for a little, a lot of the Aussies used to do it back then. It was like this, rite of passage when you sort of turn, 20, I'm going to go to England and spend 6 months there and then come home. And he wanted to do that. And we'd been partying all night and we'd got on so well. And we thought, you know what, when you come over, why don't you just come and live with us? It's ridiculous. When you make those plans when you've had way too much to drink, it was one of them plans. Anyway, a couple of months goes by, he moved over, he did live with us. They moved in with us, and it was great. It was hilarious. It was a fantastic 6 months of living together. And before we moved on to our next house, and we just become the best of friends at that point. He ended up coming home, and when we announced that we were going to be moving over to Oz, he was probably one of my only friends that was happy about it, because he was the only one over here other than Steve Hill. So when I moved over, we had plans to kind of start an event together. And he'd actually been running an event on his own before I'd come over, which was called 170. Funnily enough, he got the name. It was that he'd had his own label at the time, James, called JTS Recordings. And in the corner of his artwork, there was always this little... It was like a little speed, like a speed limit thing that had been. I think I'd done the art for him. I can't remember. I think it was me or Alex, one of our other friends that had done the art for him. But it was like a little speed limit sign. It said speed limit 170. And I think that stuck with him. So that's where the name had come from. And when I did move over, and we were kind of, trying to come up with what the concept would be for this event and a new label potentially, it was almost like it was just there, staring us in the face. It was like, we may as well just use the 170 brand that he's already got. And that was when it kind of really kicked off. So initially the label was just set up for somewhere for me and James to put our music out on. Really, it was all, the general idea was, much like most labels, we didn't know if it would last 20 releases and fizzle out. And as you probably seen recently, we've just celebrated our 200th release, and I think we've got a producer in nearly every country in the world now.
So cool.
It's really spiraled. And you're set to grace us in our next, I think, then 2 releases from now for your debut for us. Thank God, finally.
If I knew that you were going to mention it, I would have had some sound effects ready for when you said that. Hold on, I think I've got a gunshot. Hold on, here we go. Yes, you heard it here first. I will be releasing 170.
I blew it, didn't I? I should have given you a heads up.
Where's my air horn? Oh, I can't find it. Never mind that. The gunshots will have to do. But yes, I'm really, really excited and honoured and privileged to be on there. It's such an exciting label. If you are a raver, perhaps of yesteryear, because I know we have people of all generations of dance music and entertainment, go and check it out. Go and have a little listen to what Alf and James and the rest of the guys, listen to some of the music that they are releasing. As Alf has said, it's from all over the world, so every country. And it might inspire you, might help you fall in love with hardcore or hard dance again. I think certainly if you're a happy hardcore raver or an early 90s raver and maybe sort of family got in the way or you fell in love with another genre or whatever the reason, go and check it out. Have a little listen, see what's going on in 2024. And definitely, if it's the only one that you check out, make sure you check out mine.
That's the one.
Yeah, even if you don't listen to any others, just listen to mine. But okay. So I'm joking.
I mean, our mantra has always been with the label. It's we don't care if it fits a certain typecast. If it fits the mold, as long as it's a good track, it's something that James and I can play in our set, then we'll consider it. And I like to think that the discography, although we are typified by a certain sound, there is a 170 sound for sure. And I know because a lot of the demos that do get sent to us do fall into that category. And to be honest, when you do get typecast, you almost want to move further away from that. But I think we've got a very, very varied discography. We've got something on there, I think, that covers, all sounds. We're not scared to sign, a piano breakbeat track. We'll also, happily sign a ridiculously hard, almost raw style track. If it's something that James and I can envision ourselves playing, then, it's game.
I think that's brilliant. And rightly so, man. Why shouldn't you? Shouldn't be. I've always believed that. I just like music, right? And whether it's a rock song or a drum and bass song or a hard style song or whatever, I just like music, and it doesn't matter, does it? And I think that's a great ethos to take with you for the record label, and it's probably why it's one of the biggest in the world. So props to you. Right, okay, listen, we're at an hour mark now, believe it or not. So
yeah,
a couple of little sections that I want to do with you, but before I do those sections, I want to ask, what happens next?
A really good question. I'm certainly not prepared for that. I don't know. I don't even think I know myself. You never know. You never know. Look, I can tell you what's happening with the label at the moment. We've actually had a little bit of a break with 170 at the moment. We had our 200th release. We've just wanted to collect ourselves, and I think we've got a clear idea where we're going, and it's just nothing too crazy, but it's just something to reestablish our own enthusiasm in the project.
That sounds fascinating, man. I mean, I'm sure everyone is really excited to see where the label goes next, and long may it continue. What about you as a producer? Do you have any sort of any goals? Are you working on any exciting tracks yourself at the moment?
So a lot of my gigs these days are in Australia, so I do have to be very, very aware of the music I'm making. It has to be kind of compatible with the crowds out here, and it's no secret, the Australian crowd, they just seem to like things getting harder and harder and harder and harder. The whole raw thing has turned into like up tempo. Now there's like up tempo stuff that's creeping back into hard style. If any of these words sound foreign, they're foreign to me as well. But basically, what we need to know is it's very, 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 very intense and very hard. So a lot of the acts that we're playing before or after, the crowds are kind of there for these big acts that are playing this, like stuff that will strip paint off your walls, kind of stuff. Yeah. So we've been finding that a lot of our like melodic vocally stuff, it doesn't really work as such, but a lot of the stuff that we are finding is getting traction is that kind of 4/4 DnB stuff, that not necessarily the 4/4 DnB tracks that are big in the UK, not the sub-focus stuff, but just that kind of energy, the stuff that's a bit less stop-start, a little bit more rhythm. Doesn't need to be too hard, but as long as it seems to have rhythm, they seem to be going for it. So we are taking that inspiration into our own tracks now, kind of just less breakdowns, really. I think everything's been too stop-start for a little while. I remember hearing Dougal saying something similar with the hardstyle sound. He's just sort of getting a bit tired of it. And I think it's been here for a while. And as with anything, I think, everyone's always looking for something new. And when you're making the same sound every day, it's, you're always looking to take it to the next step. And I think, I think that's kind of the direction we're going at the moment. I think is a little bit more ravey, a little bit more energy.
Due to time, I have to draw it to a close. And before I do, one of the resident features, well, there's two resident features that I do at the end of every podcast. I know that you're aware of them because you listen, of course, to the podcast. But first of all, now, if I was culturally aware and more prepared, I would mention something exclusively to Australia. But because I'm useless and I'm not going to do that. So you've just finished at an HSU event. It's been a great night. You've been sandwiched between two gnarly nosebleed DJs, but yet your set went on amazingly and lifted the crowd to the highest. And you're feeling on a bit of a high. And Amy's dropped you a little text to say the kids are all in bed, and tomorrow's going to be a nice day, and you're feeling good. But before you do, on your journey back, you've got a driver because that's how good the event was. They're driving you home, and you swing into a garage. Yeah. Are you okay? So you're in the Uber and you swing into the petrol station because you need some snacks. Obviously, I know the snacks look slightly differently over there in Australia to what they do here. Not massively, but there's a few extra little ones dotted about. What are you reaching for that onward journey?
Well, one staple item on the McDonald's menu here that they don't have in the UK. I don't believe they have yet. It's genius. So we have the cheeseburger in the UK. We have the double cheeseburger. But get this, over here, they've got the fucking triple cheeseburger.
They've got them here, bro. They've got them here.
Oh, they never used to have it. All right, we've got nothing. Right, I'm moving home.
So you're going for a triple cheeseburger? Is that what you're reaching?
I thought we'd crossed, all paths of creativity there, but no, that's what I'd be going for. Yeah, it's a stodgy little bad boy. It will soak anything up that I've drank, and it will make sure that I get sleep. And
would you always go for a McDonald's? Because obviously, is there another fast? Because obviously, UK, you know it well because you lived here for most of your life. But obviously, you've got KFC, you've got Burger King. Is there extra ones in Australia?
There's loads of. I mean, I wouldn't ordinarily pick Macca's. But I mean, oh God, how Aussie am I? I called it Macca's rather than, is it Mackie D's? It's called, yeah, it's Mackie D's. I can't even remember anymore. How about that? Just that time of the night, Macca's is the one, right? It's the only one that's open. But no, there's some great places. I mean, there's a really good one I go to more often than I should around here called Mad Mex. It's just like a Mexican place, but they do like nice burritos with, the beans and the meat and the rice. That's always a go-to for lunchtime. Whenever I'm doing like studio lunchtime trips, it's always to Mad Mex. I've got a loyalty card, and you have to do 10 burritos, and then you get a free one. Yeah. And I definitely get a free one probably at least once a month.
Amazing. I love a burrito as well, man. Anything spicy, I am in. What about a drink? What drink are you going for? A cola, a milkshake, Sprite? What are you having for your drink?
Are we talking fun drink or soft drink?
Soft drink.
A soft drink, yes. Keep it PG. I just drink water. I hate soft drinks.
Oh, for real? So you're not having like a Coke or nothing, right?
I only drink soft drinks if I have to use it as a mixer, but generally I'll literally just drink water. We've just installed this really nice water filter in our tap system as well, and now I can't get enough of the tap water, and I'm just absolutely high on life that I've not got to buy bottled water anymore.
Right, okay. So, and before I move on to the last section, what about sweets and chocolate? Is there anything like that you're into? Is there anything you're vibing at the moment?
We've got an incredible sweet selection over here, but funnily enough, get this, they don't call them sweets over here, they call them lollies. Doesn't matter, like all sweets are lollies here. I know lollies for us are typified by
Yeah.
The candy on a stick that you put in your mouth and you suck it.
Yeah.
Over here, anything that's sweet is a lolly.
What?
I'm just like, nah, I'm not having that.
No.
I've lived here 10 years, I'm still not having that.
No. Okay. Well, what lolly are you going for?
Okay. Yeah. No. Let's call it a sweet. I'm not.
It sounded wrong, didn't it? I didn't like the way I sounded when I said that. Yeah. No. Okay. So
it just sounds a bit weird, doesn't it?
What lolly?
It sounds a bit strange.
It's not for me. That.
Funnily enough, my all-time favourite sweet, and it's still the same, and I can only ever buy them when I go to IKEA. It's the Dime Bar.
Love them.
I love Dime Bars. I love when they get stuck in your teeth and they just remain there for another few hours for just a memory of the beautiful thing you've just eaten.
Have you ever had a Dime Bar cheesecake thing? A Dime Bar cake?
Yes.
So good. One of my brethrens, Pimp Soul, he's a breaks and producer and hip hop and stuff, but he absolutely loves Dime Bar cake. And I remember when I went to his studio, he had this Dime Bar cake waiting for us when we got there. So
wow, that's pretty epic.
Yeah, he loves that.
We once had a recipe to do one, and I tried to do one. We had guests, we had friends coming over for as dinner guests, and I made this salted caramel dime cheesecake, and I put so much salt on it that all you could taste was salt, and I absolutely balked it. It was horrendous. It was a waste of a perfectly good 3 Dime Bars.
Terrible, man. Well, listen, for the last section, I'm just going to play you this, which I know that you're gonna love, because I know you like this.
Oh yes, this is highly recommended.
This is the section where I ask you to recommend something to our listeners. This is one of the most popular sections of any podcast. People are living off these recommendations. No pressure. But for my first one, I would like you to recommend a film or a movie, please.
It's a good question. It's a very, very good question. Mm-hmm. In fact, I've just rewatched it recently for the first time in a long time. It's brutal. It's by the greatest director of all time, but he never gets old. It's Django Unchained. Watched it a few nights ago, and it's just brilliant. Still brilliant.
Amazing. So Django, right? Okay. So there's your movie. What about a book? Do you read books? I mean, I know not everyone does. I'm mindful of this because I haven't recently. I'm not reading anything at the moment, but I had a bit of a thing where I was setting myself targets of books to read every year, and I was doing quite well. My wife is an avid reader. I tend to reach for something different every time, so I like it. But nonetheless, do you have any books that you would recommend, old or new?
Look, I'm not going to lie. I'm not much of a reader. I don't find the limited time I do have, I just wouldn't ever think to go and pick up a book. Saying that, I did just buy a book recently from a good friend of mine, Rob Tessera, who has put together a new book called The Smiler, A DJ's Life. And he is one of my all-time great friends in this industry. And he's put pen to paper and told his many fantastic, fabulous, colourful stories. And yeah, it's a great read. It really is. And that is one that I did read.
Well, to get people, I mean, I've worked with Rob. I've not only worked with him in a musical capacity, but I've also worked with him in the classroom. And he's just,
what a beauty he is.
Yeah, he's just a lovely, lovely guy. And also, if you need more of a reason than what Alf's just said to read it, for those that don't know, Rob was involved in the pirate sort of illegal rave days and actually ended up going to jail because of something that happened.
Which is a big part of the book.
So I don't want to give too much away, but if you're thinking of illegal raves and the criminal justice bill and the riots and all that kind of stuff, go get his book and have a little read on that. I've heard it, luckily for me, straight from the horse's mouth, but certainly you should totally go and...
It sounds better coming out of his mouth, doesn't it?
He's just a beautiful man, and he's just... Shout out to Rob Tessera, amazing guy. Right, okay, finally, and it's up to you whether you take both options. So far, everybody has, but I would like you to recommend something that people can jump on their Spotify or YouTube or whatever it is that they use, and it's to be an album. Now, first of all, I would like you to recommend an album that isn't dance music.
Okay, well, my favourite non-dance album that I can recommend is Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know, right?
Well, do you know that maybe that feeds into some of those epic breakdowns that you're doing?
There you go. I mean, it's so creative. When you think this stuff was done in the 70s, I watched a documentary the other day about the hoops they had to jump through to make it that album happen. It's just, they bent science to make it happen, essentially. And it sounds like it. I mean, obviously, when you listen to an album like that when you're a young boy and, it's in the 80s and 90s, and nothing else like it. It is the sound of aliens landing on Earth. It really is just the embodiment of it. And it's just a beautiful album. It's just so well done. It's
amazing.
Extremely well narrated. And I just have so many memories listening to it as a kid. And now I play it to my kids and bore them with it. I don't think they're quite as enthusiastic about it as I was.
Well, listen, ladies and gentlemen, if you're checking out that album at any point over the next whenever it is that you listen to this, then please drop Alf a message on social media and let him know your thoughts. Did you love it? Did it bore you? Is it your new go-to? Let him know.
Very high chance.
Well, you never know. You never know. What about dance music? Is there a dance music one that you would give a shout out to?
It's not classic by any means, but it's something to check out if you've never heard it. It's Ferry Corsten. It's called LEF, and it came out 2006. Ooh. And it was when Ferry Corsten had just stopped doing his classic trance sound, and he'd started experimenting with some quirky stuff. And I remember at the time not loving it that much, and then years later coming back to it, and I was like, this is pretty sick.
Absolutely love that. And ladies and gentlemen, that was...
Oh, yes, this is highly recommended.
With DJ Technikore. Listen, Alf, I've got to say, listening to your story is, it's no different. Every episode, I'm always just sat here loving every piece of information, and I sort of cherry pick moments that just the stuff that you've spoke about will stay with me onwards. And I really, really appreciate you taking time out of your evening, because I know whilst it's morning here, it's late at night over there. I also appreciate that you've had to work it around your family life, and it's the weekend, etc., etc., etc. But I mean, you're such a wonderful person, and as I mentioned earlier, away from your extreme talent in writing records and songwriting and all the other stuff, that running a label, you're just a great person, and I'm confident that most people listening to this are going to want to be your best mate after hearing this. So I normally action people to go and leave an emoji on whatever the social media post is that's the most recent. And the reason I say the most recent is because some people will be listening to this on day one of release. Some people might discover it in 2 years' time. They might, hear it somewhere in the future and be listening to this very interview. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to go onto Instagram, Facebook, whatever social media that it is that you follow, Technikore/Technikal, depending on what era of his career that you follow. And what I want you to do is to go to your emojis on your phone, because I assume even in the future you're still going to be using emojis on your phone. And I think, because let me think about this, what I want you to do, and I'm basing it on our conversation. So I think you said, so you got your DJ name from a computer game, right? That's right? It was a little something. Go on.
Actually, don't want to extend this any longer than it needs to be, but my it came from a computer game, Technikal, but Technikore, I never told you how that came about.
Oh, go on.
That was very quickly. That was my wife. We were sitting on the tube one day, and I was stuck for a name, and it was her that came up with using the same name. She said, "Why don't you just call it Technikore?" And she said it as a joke, and I was like, "That's fucking brilliant. I'm going to use it." She was like, "No, I was only joking." I'm like, "Nah, that's it. That's it now. It's done."
So okay, because of the word core, the emoji that I would like, this is going to annoy you. The emoji that, yes, I want you to leave an apple on whatever Alf's most recent social media post is. And this will go on forever, Alf. I'm sorry about this. Dougal, Ixie, they're all still getting emojis now from 6, 7, 8 months ago. I want you to go to whatever his most recent post is and leave an apple And that basically, what that apple means to Alf is he'll be able to see that you are an epic fan. It'll also mean that you are supporting him, and it'll let him know what a great human being you are. And I just think it's a lovely way of leaving a bit of an imprint on this conversation today.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And thank you for your lovely words, mate. You're too kind. You're an absolute superstar yourself.
Ah, bless you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Technikore. Thanks for your time, bro.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it. Have a good day, bud.
If you enjoyed what you heard here today, then please like, comment and subscribe. Also, if you have any comments, suggestions or anything else, ping us an email on thepodnoodle@wzkd.co.uk.